Have you ever wondered how performing on the Great Wall of China could transform business leadership? Well, our guest, Brigham Blackham, has done exactly that twice. Now, he's here to share how storytelling can turn everyday moments into business gold.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Now, I'm excited to welcome Brigham to the show. It's Fortify Live. We are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and a few other places. Welcome to today's episode. I know I was on your show, and I'm glad that you're here on our show. So in the show opening, I talked about this Wall of China and what you've done. Just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you built your expertise.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here for Fortify Live. This is awesome. When I first got interested in performing, I was a young kid, but this idea of going and performing internationally was something I always wanted to do. In college, I had two opportunities to do that. My first opportunity was about a year into my college experience. I was with this group called Raging Red. It was phenomenal. We went to Beijing, and I was able to perform on Juyongguan, which is just outside of Beijing City, and it was so amazing because we had probably 500 to 1,000 people that were on the Great Wall hiking, but we had set up this beautiful stage, and it was this really different type of a cultural experience because about a third of the people that were there for the performance, and the other 2/3 were just tourists that got to hear it the whole time they were walking up the side of the Great Wall. Got to break dance a little bit, got to sing Walk Like a Man. I had my very first performance we had. Have you ever watched Tangled? And do you remember that scene where they say, "You got a dream," like that song, "I've Got a Dream"? Oh my goodness. I got to dress up like a Viking, and it was a blast. So I didn't just perform, I was able to sing and dance and do all these different things to connect with people, and it was amazing. And one of the reasons why that was so powerful, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show, I'm sure, was it was two different miracles to be able to get to that stage. And every single time that you have some amazing experience happen, a lot of times you will have massive setbacks beforehand. You will have massive challenges. But being able to say, I was able to get on the Great Wall of China and provide an amazing show and connect with people in such a meaningful way, it was so worth all of the trials and the tribulations that it took to get there. So that's a little bit of my background as far as being able to be on the Great Wall of China. I speak Mandarin Chinese, so that was one of my dreams after. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I served a mission in Taiwan. So if you look up here on my wall, you'll see one of my prized possessions. It's all about serving. And I served for 2 years for my church. I was able to speak Mandarin Chinese every single day. And then when I came back from my mission, I was like, I want to actually apply myself and figure out how I could teach this language to other people, see how I can help other people learn. And I started really diving in and figuring out how can I use storytelling to help people learn language. And as I stepped into that role, that's what I focused on in college, was theater and teaching language. I graduated with my degree. I went to BYU, which is one of the most linguistically diverse universities in the country. Had a wonderful experience there. Taught for 7 years doing Mandarin Chinese and theater as a high school teacher. Absolutely loved that experience, but I realized really quickly that you hit a glass ceiling very fast in education. There's not a lot of upside. You can get a lot better at your craft as a teacher and not make $1 more. And one of the things it was crazy because almost any other profession you have a way to increase your value. The only way you could there is if you were coaching. And I did take that coaching route, which was amazing. I loved teaching theater and helping people have those breakthroughs. And it was like something that lived in my soul, being able to help someone figure out how they could live on stage, how they could overcome stage fright, what they could do to articulate their story and the performance the very best that they could. I love doing that. And as I got into really helping more people, I realized I didn't want to just do it in my classroom. I want to find more people to help. So I stepped into the idea of what could it take, or what would it take for me to go and be an entrepreneur. And my first taste at that was actually in Airbnb. I don't know if you've ever stayed in a short-term rental before.
A couple times.
But that was a couple times. Excellent. I mean, as a speaker, you're all over the place.
Right.
Hotels all the time, but Airbnb, VRBO, those types of properties, that's something that I said, if I could figure that out, then I could at least have a baseline to go and do my dream and be able to speak with more people. So I focused on figuring out how can I acquire some assets that can give me a baseline so I can actually be a speaker. Over the last 5 years, I found 9 short-term rentals that I built out, and I've been just absolutely loving that. Airbnb.com, you're looking here at the bottom of the screen. That's my business. It's for short-term rentals, and that sustains my speaking business. It's the thing that allows me to go and live my dreams. You know, a lot of people, they think, I only have a job, and that's the only way I can make income. But I had to do a lot of research to figure out, you know what? If you can buy assets or you can create assets, they can pay you over and over and over again. And then it's not a matter of how much have I accumulated, it's how much can these assets continually churn off in cash flow. So that's a little bit of my journey. I know it's probably a little bit more than you're expecting at the very top, but I'm really grateful to,
we've got
really
listeners,
grateful to get to know you.
We've got listeners that are entrepreneurs, franchisees, franchisors, private equity groups, business owners of all sizes, organizations, and so forth. And so we talked a little bit in the teaser about, storytelling and how that leads into leadership. I think one of the biggest challenges organizations have today is inspiring their customers and inspiring and engaging their internal customers, which are their employees. How do you find, attract, and retain employees? How do you build strong leaders? How do you create a culture that everybody loves? How do you manage effectively? How do you overcome the challenges of constant change and disruption? And then, of course, how do you improve communication? So with your background in those areas, I know you specialize right now in helping leaders unlock their success stories. Tell us a little bit about why is that important and how does a brand actually go about doing that?
Excellent. Well, let's start here. A lot of times people follow people, not brands. When you think about social media, when you think about finding someone online, if you Google somebody's name and you don't find them, you're kind of losing that opportunity to connect with your audience. If you Google them and you have to go to the second page of Google, I've heard this from multiple people, the second page of Google is the best place to hide a dead body.
That's right.
So you want to make sure that if people Google you, they find your content. And one of my great friends, I think he says it best. He says, content is king. If you can continually produce amazing content, you make videos that people want to see, you share stories that people want to hear, and you provide value by solving problems that people actually want solved, eventually you will become not just an expert, you will become an authority in that space. And the easier it is for people to know, like, and trust you as a business owner, the easier it is for them to purchase from you. So for me, if I'm going to help anybody as a success story strategist, I have to not only know what your story is, I need to know how I can help you unlock that story, take it from the page to the stage. Because if all you can do is write it and use ChatGPT or all these different AI tools to write it out for you, and they're the only ones that can voice it, there's not a huge likability factor. But as soon as you can take those ideas, even if you got them started with AI, and you can put them in your own voice, use your own story, and then put the human element behind your brand, suddenly people will start to know, like, and trust you, and people will often connect with you way faster than they connect with some random brand. Does that answer your question, Ford?
No, it does. And it brings us into an area of, when I've talked to people, and even in the green room earlier, you saw me, I was talking to Ray Geva. He's the CEO and founder of Cookie Dough Bliss. It's a new franchise brand. It's got 27 locations, and it's growing quite quickly. And, we were talking about him creating his own podcast. And he was like, well, how do I position myself for the podcast? And I said, well, first thing you want to do is set up a custom GPT and call it Uri's Podcast Producer and set up all your custom instructions and train it so that when you have a guest on the show, like I do with you, I'll say, okay, here's my next guest, and come up with a show hook, a show opener, and potential questions. I don't use all the questions, but it helps give a narrative, right? And at first he was like, well, I don't really know the benefits of why I did it. I said, well, you're trying to get investors. It's going to bring social proof and credibility. You're trying to attract employees. It'll help. You're trying to attract potential franchisees. You're not doing it as a pitch, for compliance reasons, but you're doing it to help showcase who you are. And I always tell people, especially like you and I who are speakers and go out and help other people, it really comes down to their digital footprint, like you said, what shows up, and how do you dominate the first page. So when someone Googles my name, I don't just have the top listing, I have the whole page of listings because I don't want anything to be shown. I mean, I know years ago I had an employee who embezzled from me from my agency at Prime Concepts, and I had a really bad review on Glassdoor, and those are things you just can't get rid of. I don't care what you try to do other than trying to put new content to push it down, but, it is what it is. And I fired this employee because they embezzled from me, and of course then they went on to Glassdoor, and what was the best point about Prime Concepts? And the person wrote, the day I left, the owner's crazy. And I'm like, at first I was kind of upset, and I'm like, you know what, I don't care, let the haters hate. They didn't tell them that they embezzled money, and that's why I fired him. But the important thing is what shows up in the search engines, what shows up on Google Business, what shows up on your website, what shows up on social media, business directory, and review websites. So there's like 6 or 7 different things that help your footprint. So for those of you listening today, we are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and a few other places. This audio also becomes the audio for the Business Growth Show podcast. And so if you want to check out our guest today, it's Brigham Blackham. You can check him out at staybnb, I'm going to spell it out, .com. So STAY, BNB, and then 2 E's. So staybnb with like the insect, I guess I would say, .com. So you can check him out if you're interested. He's also got a show. Now tell me a little about your show. I was on it, but you go live on LinkedIn. And when do you go live?
Yeah, I go live on Thursday mornings, and I've been doing that this whole year. My goal this year is actually to have 100 episodes, and I was able to surpass that goal by 10. I've already had 110 episodes this year, so thanks for coming and being part of that dream turned into a reality, because that's what I love to do, is to have a goal, set that intention, and make it happen. So my goal with that is to really find amazing people that want to take their message from the page to the stage, be able to open up and share their patterns of progress and connect with industry experts, and figure out how I can give them the platform to share their experience, share patterns of progress. I absolutely love connecting with people that are just like you, that are movers and shakers and are willing to be of service.
Yeah, and I think that you're willing to be of service. To me, it's always been, I always look for guests that are critical thinkers, that are open-minded, and that they're a catalyst. The ones that know they don't know everything and know they don't know what they don't know. I mean, the more I interview people, the more I learn in business, and I've been in business for decades. The more I learn I don't know. Now, I'm very opinionated. I've written multiple books, and I know what I'm talking about, but I'm also very open and coachable, and I think that comes from my marketing background, because as an inventor of multiple products, sold hundreds of millions of dollars of products of my own, and those are my clients, and what I've learned is let the marketplace tell you what's working. If what you're doing right now is working, it's because you've got the right message, going to the right market, using the right method. And so the message always comes first. So in your case, telling great stories, telling great narratives, whether it's for an individual or a brand. And certainly if it is a brand, it's the leadership telling their stories. And then how are you going to communicate? In this case, my method is a podcast. I'm also a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, a strategist, and a board member and things like that. But I'm always asking myself the question, how do I add value and make a profit? I don't want to find a need and fill it. I think the quickest way to bankruptcy is to find a need and fill it. I think what you want to do is find a want and fill it. People don't do what they need. They do what they want. If they did what they need, we wouldn't have an obese epidemic in the world today. I know for me, I had a salad at lunch, but there was leftover pizza, and I'm like, oh man, I want some pizza, but I'm like, I gotta stay away from my episodes today, so I didn't do that. But I probably will tonight after my bike ride. But the whole point though is, success leaves clues. Just like you and I, we're constant learners and readers. We don't claim to know everything, but I encourage listeners to follow certain podcasts. Obviously, follow your podcast. take the key points, listen in the background. There's always something you can get out of it, even if it's something you hear that you don't want to do. It's not about agreeing with everything. It's about being a critical thinker, open-minded, and being coachable. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. One of the biggest benefits to owning your own podcast platform is having that golden mic where you can go and connect with like-minded individuals. I've had so many opportunities come because I wasn't just willing to go and guest on other people's shows. I was able to bring people in, and you have a very intimate setting in that where you can ask really great questions. You're able to connect with them in a deeper way than if you did over, let's say, a networking weekend where you have maybe 45 minutes spaced out over a weekend. Very different experience than a full focused half an hour. I absolutely love podcast platform because then not only do you learn from that, you can also reference back to it. Like, oh, what was it they said? You can actually go and reference that document, take the transcript, and create a blog. There's so many different ways to repurpose it. So I love doing the work really well once and then being able to have the value go out and kind of have claws into the internet where it can crawl and have a little bit of, I would say, like a life of its own. Some episodes will really impact a lot of people, and I love that.
You know, for me, I do it two ways. I have industry experts. I have a lot of CEOs in franchising. I have other speakers and experts in leadership like you and a lot of my colleagues in the business. I was the founder of the $1 Million Speakers Group, which is not to pat myself on the back. It just means conversations at different levels. There's a different type of dynamic of speakers that are making 7 figures or 8 figures than are just starting out at maybe 6 figures or below. And so I like to have those experts on. And what I think is really interesting now is I do a lot of work in AI, as we talked about on your show. And what I like is Gemini's new model where it can take notes and it actually has a podcast. I'm like, they're competing with you and me. I mean, now you just put in the topic of 6 keys to leadership, and all of a sudden it creates an episode of 2 AIs talking to each other, stuttering and making words up. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be replaced. And people always ask me, is AI going to replace humans? And I always tell them, it's not going to replace humans, but it is going to replace humans that aren't using AI. So as this new world multimodal keeps growing faster and faster, the podcast methodology is now used by AI to help train people because people have gotten so conditioned to having a narrative. Like our listeners right now are able to eavesdrop on our conversation, but they're able to get to see who we are. They can Google us while they're listening, and they get a chance to interact with us, putting comments in the show notes below. So if you're watching this or listening to this right now, put a comment in the thing below. What topics would you like to hear? What's your biggest challenge that you're facing that you'd like to see go away? And then maybe we can both handle it on future episodes. What do you look for in a great guest for your podcast?
That's a great question. The most important thing for me is, are they genuine? Are they someone that I honestly want to associate with long term? If I'm looking to not just make a connection, I want to make a friend, and I want to be able to help them and help myself. Because part of this is not just the moment that you share on the podcast. It's building momentum, seeing how I can scratch their back, they can scratch mine. In Mandarin, there's this idea. It's called guanxi. Have you ever heard this term before, Ford?
No, go for it. And even if I have, tell our listeners.
No worries. Guanxi is this idea of reciprocity. As you help somebody else with no expectation that you're going to get anything from them, and they help you with no expectation they're going to get anything from you, eventually there's a synergy that's created. And that type of connection in business is one of my favorite things to do. And as you have that type of a relationship, Guan and Shi have really interesting ideas. So the Shi is a system, and Guan is that relationship. It's your system of relationships, or your system of connection. And I love that idea and that concept because as soon as you have that type of a relationship, that you're going to go help somebody just because you want to help them, eventually that will come back. And it doesn't mean that you expect reciprocity from them.
Right.
But
it's not like
you know
you're
that
asking
God's
for
going to take care of you.
Right.
Exactly. You're going to go help them. You're going to give it out into the universe. And eventually, you know that God will take care of you. That's my idea of guanxi, and I think it's so helpful. It's a 1,000-year-old idea, but it's one that you absolutely still have relevance now. Because that's how truth works when it's a great principle.
No, I think it's great. One of my clients and colleagues, he was a mentor of mine before he became a client, was Dr. Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book called Influence, and then he wrote a book called Pre-Influence and a few others, and he sold 65 million copies of the book, multiple languages. And in there he talks about the law of reciprocity as it relates to business and marketing. And it's not, it's not the same, it's the same concept that you're talking about, but from a proven scientific method, that there are ways to do it where it's not manipulative, it's authentic. And that's what we're talking about here today. And, I sent out thank you gifts I send them out over Thanksgiving, right? I don't send them over Christmas or holidays, and we're not being political or non-denominational or whatever we're talking about today. It is my show. I can pretty much say what I want. But I like to send thank you cards and gifts around Thanksgiving. Thank you for being on my show. Thank you for being a client, blah, blah, blah. And I had a client reach out to me and say, hey, I really love the brownies you sent. It was like $30, $40. It wasn't a big gift. And they're like, I talked to my accountant this month, and they need me to, invest in some things. I'm thinking about transforming my website, and I know you have an agency. Can you give me a quote? And, of course, I gave him a quote. And, he signed and prepaid because he wanted it, before the end of the year. And, I'm not saying the brownies did everything to do with it, but I'm guarantee you that it probably didn't hurt, right? Which is really interesting because, I don't have the best handwriting in the world. And so I hate writing, or I shouldn't say hate. I choose sometimes not to want to write handwritten notes. But I get these handwritten notes from other speakers, and their printing is so clear. And I have a printer font. I've tried to use it, and it's like, so now I just scribble down on a card. But I found that just the simplest act that a lot of generations have forgot, just the shock and awe, thank you letters, the stick letters on products, surprise and delight, giving them something that they weren't expecting. I know our episode today is about storytelling, but it's also about adding value, right? And so for your listeners out there, who should you send thank you cards to today? Is there 10 people? Go write 10 thank you cards, and you don't know you don't expect anything back from it, but also make it personal if there's something you can reference. I know for me, from a prospecting standpoint, on LinkedIn, I'll go find potential prospects that I want to speak for as a keynote speaker, and I'll comment authentically on their posts. I don't try to connect with them. I don't try to, some sleazy inbox message. I see we're both in business. We should connect. I don't do that. But it's amazing how these tools, podcasts, prospecting, the ability to tell your stories online, in social media, in the media, on traditional media, on podcasts. Certainly one action step I would tell our listeners is there's all kinds of podcast directories and podcast match. I can't remember the actual website right now off the top of my head. But you can go in there and type a topic in and find all the podcasts. And then I would recommend being a guest. But I would search for the low-hanging fruit. Don't go to the podcast that has the highest number of listeners. You need to show that you are a good guest and that you're credible because, and again, it doesn't matter if 10 people are listening to the episode. What matters is that you're practicing answering the question in short sound bites. Where do you go when you want to find? Obviously, you have guests. But do you spend a lot of time being a guest like you are on my show today?
Yeah. Well, this year my focus was building my own podcast, but I have had a secondary focus of being a guest on others' podcasts. This year I was able to do 42 podcast guest appearances, which wasn't too bad, but I wanted to hit 52 by the end of the year, so I'm just going to keep, connecting with more people.
There's probably 10 more you can do today, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many people that are searching for guests and searching for ways that they can connect with awesome people. So if you're an industry expert and you have a story that's worth sharing and you're willing to share it, podcast hosts are looking for you, so go do it. One of the ways that I've been able to find such amazing people is I network very intentionally. I find people that are not only like-minded, but they're also in the industry that I am comfortable talking about. Most of mine are in real estate investing. So I've got a lot of background in that. For 5 years, I've been able to really dive deep into understanding that niche in short-term rentals. So I've been on a few of those. And then also in storytelling and theater and speaking. So those are the three main areas that I search out to really find ways that I can add value. And then as I'm connecting with people, I just say, hey, if you've got a podcast and I can add value, let's see how I could help you out. A lot of times...
Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, I have one other idea. I have been looking for specific groups to associate with. One of them is the Final Percent Network. Another one is Renatus. I've got these two that I've probably had more than 3/4 of my own guests come from. But as far as me being able to guest on other people's shows, I go out on Facebook, I go out on LinkedIn, and I look for people that are searching for guests. Because you'd be surprised how many people are actually actively saying, hey, if you want to be a guest, here's where you can come and hook into our sign-up sheet, and I'd love to do that. And you can just spend enough time, 5-10 minutes every single day, actually going and submitting applications. I know 3 or 4 months ago, I went gangbusters for a little while, and I put 218 applications in a month. It was nuts.
Wow, that's pretty good.
But I was able to book a handful of great podcasts, and I was able to connect with a lot of people. I'm not saying everyone's going to be able to have those types of results. I got about 20 podcasts from that. Like 1 in 10 that I sent that was cold, never met them before, was able to get on their show. But if you already have a relationship, that's typically the easiest way to guest on someone's show. You already know, like, and trust them a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really important, for listeners out there, you might be thinking, I run a HVAC company, or I run a home services, or a plumbing, or, Christmas light business, or whatever it is. Getting on episodes, even in your local community where you're talking about success, helps expose your brand. So it does help you. It's not just for speakers, authors, trainers, and experts. It's also for brands like you were talking about. Now, I know I've heard of this story called the banana story that ties into your approach for storytelling. What the heck is that all about?
All right, you need to hear this. This was the most embarrassing moment I had on my entire mission. So here's how it goes. I was about 2 months in serving in Taiwan. Didn't have a great language yet. Mandarin is a little tough to learn in a few months.
I think.
I had this idea that I was like, I'm going to take this word that I learned and I'm going to use it today, no matter what. And the word was banana. It's xiangjiao. And we went to the grocery store, and it was preparation day. That's when we do all of our shopping. I go in there, and I open the door, ching-ching. That's not racist, that's just the bell.
I get it.
Yeah, I go in there, and I saw this beautiful girl at the back there. And I was like, oh, I can speak in Chinese to her, and my companion will be right here, it'll be perfect. I walk up to her, and I say, 我要新疆. And she looked at me, and she said, excuse me? What? What? And my companion looked horrified. He's like, well, what did you just say, Elder? I said, I want a banana? Where can I find a banana? And she said, that is not what you said. You said, do you have sex? Like sexual intercourse. And I was like, no, not what I meant. And I couldn't out-gesture what I meant because it was a banana. There was no way to salvage the situation, and I just had to leave. Ching-ching. I left the situation. Extremely embarrassed, but I never forgot that word. Xiangjiao is banana. Xingjiao is sexual intercourse.
Wow, that's pretty close.
One word difference. One little sound difference was all.
Well, it's interesting. I made two faux pas on an episode one time. I grew up in the projects with a ninth grade education. I self-educated myself. I've had several businesses, but my vocabulary is focused around business and success and leadership. And I made a comment one time using the word libido, and what I was thinking was the front of your brain. Like I was thinking about, and so I kept saying it. And then in the podcast, some of the notes go, do you know what word you're saying? I'm like, evidently not. So obviously, people can laugh. If you've listened to this long in the episode, thank you for staying here. But I didn't know that. And then the other one I did wrong, which I said from stage. I said, some people just get distracted, Netflix and chill. And I was thinking that Netflix and chill meant you're binge watching Netflix. Like I didn't know the vernacular of the Urban Dictionary version of what that really meant. And so then, Devin, who's my marketing director, saw the replay and she said, do you know what you just told that audience? And I said, yeah, that sometimes they waste too much time just binge watching Netflix. And she said, that's not what it means, Ford. It means Netflix and, having sex. And I'm like, I had no idea. So I think that one of the things that's really important when you are telling stories is to be humble and authentic. And sometimes you're going to make a mistake, like just the difference between one word can make all the difference in the world. I know for me, bringing this back to a business standpoint, I work with a lot of executives. I never say learn. Like I speak on business growth and leadership and AI. I never say learn. Sometimes with AI I can use learn, but I don't use the word learn because CEOs they have egos and they already feel like they know a lot. And so I'd rather say discover and reveal. So sometimes, when you are telling stories, the vocabulary that you use makes a big difference. So for me, you'll never see learn on anything I write unless it's related to AI, because I'm not expected them to understand. Like I could say, learn how to create a custom GPT. Most people wouldn't know what that means or how to do it. Where if I said, I'm going to teach you, same thing with teach. I don't say teach, I say discover. Yeah. I would never say to a CEO or to a group, I'm going to teach you how to improve your leadership. They look at me like, are you crazy, buddy? We are a billion-dollar company. So in your storytelling, one word can make a difference in the context on what that actually means. Now, obviously, I know what libido means now, and I know what Netflix and chill means now, and now I know to be careful in Mandarin if I ever use the word banana, because, boy, that is a very close word.
That's close, right?
That's crazy.
One of the things that I love that you just brought up is the importance of language. I am a linguist, so I come from a background of Mandarin Chinese. I also speak some Spanish. I've been learning ASL, and I absolutely love French as well. Anytime you have a great word, there is, in the etymology, a deeper meaning. A lot of times it's not just the connotation, you also have the denotation. You get to play with these on stage. And I love how the right word at the right time can open insights, just like what you said with discover or recall new things or to uncover different things instead of learning. I think that's a beautiful way to think about this. One of the ways that I've been able to start to unpack language is by recognizing anytime you're using demotivating language, it stops you in your progression. If you say, every time I do X, Y, or Z, I just get so frustrated, or I can't X, Y, or Z. Anytime you use that type of language, you are telling your brain to stop thinking of the answers. And I learned this from Sharon Lechter, actually. She was on my podcast about a month ago. And she gave this idea that if you are so stuck in your ways that you can't think, how could this happen? Then you are closed off. You're done learning. And one of the reasons one of my businesses is called Xing, which in Mandarin means to progress. The progressive form of any verb is the ing. I'm going, I'm doing, I'm thinking. Because you're no longer done. It's not something that's happened, it's happening right now. When we're in that progress and we're willing to move forward and say, I don't have everything right now, but I'm doing my very best with what I do have. In that progress, you can make so much opportunity for yourself. Not everybody is able to say, look, I've learned this much, and it's big enough that everyone can benefit from it. But if you can say, this is what I'm learning right now, other people can connect with that. But if you say, I'm the expert and there's nobody else that has more understanding than me, you actually throw up a huge wall in between you and your audience. You say, this is what I've learned. This is what I've been studying. This is all the different things that I've discovered or things that I've been enjoying. Can I share this with you? And you get that permission, changes the conversation, and people are more open to receive.
Certainly does.
I hope that was helpful.
I have a great book I read. I mean, I've got a library behind me. I don't know if I will be able to see everything here if I hit my proper screen here. So behind me, you can see some of the books that are over there. And so I have a book on mindset. I've always been talking about open-minded versus closed-minded. Closed-minded people believe that there's no opportunities and that they believe their past dictates their future. And open-minded means that they're open to conditioning, that your environment, your upbringing, your gender, and all that doesn't affect yourself, and it's open-minded. So great book, Carol Dweck, called Mindset, and it just is in alignment with what I think. And I remember in working through her whole thing, and again, anything in personal growth, if you've ever done any personal growth, I can versus I can't. You know, it's the old Henry Ford quote, I think, I don't remember if it's Henry Ford now. I'm making that up, but I don't remember who said it. But it basically says, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you're right, right? And so I believe it was Henry Ford, but it goes back to the belief system. Whenever I'm talking to somebody, I listen to their language patterns, like you said. Obviously, I only speak English. I'd have to use ChatGPT to speak any other language. And but it's really important that, you know, people are coachable. And even when I'm a strategic advisor, brands hire me to come with, and I listen to the executives, and they'll say things like, well, there's just no market. Our supply chains, they're all negative. And I always say, are you open to an opportunity? Because if you're focused on what you can't do, you're not focused in the right direction, which is just saying the same thing you're saying in a different way. And I think it's the same for our listeners. You know, it doesn't mean if you agree with Brigham and I today on this episode, it's, are you a critical thinker? Are you feeding your mind anything? Or are you just listening to the herd? I mean, in the early 70s, way before you were born, there was a book, pardon me, called Rhinoceros Success. A thin little book. I got it on my book here somewhere. But the concept I never forgot, and it was about that people are two different types of people. There are rhinos that are thick-skinned. They live in the jungle. They're loners. They charge after what they want. But they have to have thick skin, because the higher you get in business, the more people are trying to, you know, kill you and cut you down. And not physically, sorry about that's probably politically bad. Let's just say the more people are going to sling zingers at you to kind of hurt your feelings. And then there's cows that are just fed, waiting to be slaughtered. And so for me, I've always, and you know, people talk about wolf and sheep and everything, but I've always remembered the rhino, and I actually have rhinos behind me just as a reminder to charge after what I want and have thick skin, because not everybody's going to agree with me, and I had to become really comfortable with that. I just recently did a post on LinkedIn, and I published my book, AI Mindshift, and one of the literary agents who I didn't go with posted a post that said, congratulations on your self-published book. Let me know when you sell 5,000 copies, and if you're interested to go to a traditional publisher to get all the benefits. Now, I know what she was trying to do. One, she's trying to be visible on my LinkedIn. I could have deleted the comment, because I'm like, well, that's not appropriate. But then I thought, no, I'm gonna leave the comment up there, because the more comments help the post, and it wasn't really negative. But I did respond and say, well, having a self-published book allows me to go to market quicker, allows me to print on demand. So if I need to change chapter 6 because of something, I can upload a new file, and then everybody who buys the book on Amazon gets the new file. So it was interesting how, you know, someone's perspective was that way. But going back to the point of, if I was closed-minded or fear-based, I would have deleted it. But I'm like, no, I welcome the opportunity. I welcome the feedback. Not everybody's going to agree with me. And if there's, like I said, there's one thing I've known, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know, right? I mean, I said that in the beginning. So I'm very opinionated. I know what I know, but I'm also savvy enough to know that it's okay not to know everything. And the scariest people to me are the ones that think they know everything. They're not coachable. They're not open-minded. They're not critical thinkers. They really are closed-minded and shut off to the opportunities that's right in front of them.
Yeah. You know, there's this old saying in Mandarin that just popped into my head while you were talking. I thought it was applicable. 活到老，学到老. If you're going to live till you're old, you might as well learn until you're old. It's the idea of you're never done until you're done. And I think every single time we are interacting with somebody else, every conversation, we have the opportunity to either absorb some of that information and apply it in our life for good or for not. And we can see, is this going to be a warning, or is this going to be an example I want to follow? Every single time you have that interaction, you can choose, am I going to follow what they say, or am I going to say, I'm glad that I don't have to follow that example? I love that idea, because learning is so important. And when it comes down to storytelling, it comes down to all the different ways that leadership shows up in your business. Just to kind of come back to what you brought up earlier, one of the things that I think is really important is you got to check your BS.
Yep.
And when I say BS, you're talking about belief systems.
Yeah, that's in my keynote. Did you watch my opening keynote?
I haven't. Oh my goodness,
in my keynote. So I actually have a section in it where I say, here's how I do it. I interrupted you on purpose. So I'm going to ask you a question. I tell people in my keynotes, it's really easy to condition people. And so for those of you listening, including you right now, We didn't set this up. First instinct, Brigham, what color are yield signs?
Yield signs?
Yeah, first instinct.
Usually yellow.
No, never yellow. In the United States, North America,
they're red and white. Oh,
they've been red and white since 1975. So I talk about conditioning, and then I say, what does BS stand for? And of course, the audience yells out, bullshit. Sorry. I tell them, no, BS doesn't stand for bullshit. It stands for belief system. But I say, some of your belief systems are what? And then everybody yells bullshit, right? And so I just had to throw that in here because I've been using that now for 30 years. So, but it really is true, though. One word, one analogy can mean something different. So for you, go ahead now, tell your story. I just had to, I interrupted because I'm the show host.
You're good.
But tell me about your experience with BS and belief systems.
Well, BS is something that I had to reframe in my mind because my middle name is Sky. So BS Blackham is literally my name. And as a middle schooler, you kind of get ridiculed at times when you have a silly acronym like that. But I had to early on recognize that it is my belief system. How I show up and how other people perceive me is not so much how they talk about me, it's how I accept and reflect or I accept those comments. I have a choice whether I say, yes, this is something that applies to me or not. Like if someone said, wow, you have really ugly purple hair, Ford, that means nothing to you. It doesn't affect you because you're like, that's just not true about me. Same thing if you have anything in your business that you flagrantly know is inaccurate, you don't have to accept those comments. Just let it run off your back. That's that rhino skin that you were talking about.
That's right.
Every time that you have something that is a very helpful comment, this is one of my concepts I think is really helpful. It's something called accept the arrow. Have you ever heard this concept before?
No, give me this one. This one's a new one. So
okay.
let's hear it.
So when you have this idea of accepting the arrow, sometimes people will shoot comments at you. And if it is meant to harm, I want to deflect that. You're like, hey, that was that purple hair comment. Doesn't mean anything. Whatever. Right? You put up a shield, hit whatever. But if you have, let's say, a bad review on, say, one of your short-term rentals, or a bad review that whatever it is that you're selling, product or service, you can say thank you for that. Accept that arrow that they shot at you and say, what can I learn from this? How can I take this review and instead of have this become something that kills me, it can actually save my business long term. So a lot of times if you don't accept that arrow, more arrows are going to be coming. One arrow might not kill you, but maybe 10 or 20 might. So that's one of those ideas that I think if you are conscientious of how people are responding to your services, to your products, if you're getting consistently bad reviews, a lot of times you need to be looking in the mirror saying, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to change? Because the services that I'm providing is not meeting expectations. And if all your expectations, that's only good service. People don't leave 5-star reviews for good service. They leave 5-star reviews for excellent service. Anything that goes above and beyond what they think. Because you have to make a promise and you over-deliver to get those 5-star reviews.
Yeah, so I have a concept. Yeah, go ahead. Finish it up. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that's one of the reasons why my reviews have consistently been able to get better and better on Airbnb, was because I track every negative review. Every one that I've ever had, I've put in a bank and I figure out how have we dealt with this? What have we done? And respond.
Well, you're asking the right questions. You're a critical thinker. You're walking the talk. I mean, I know for me, the arrow of accepting the arrows, for me, it was a long time ago. I heard a speaker say that negative comments were kind of like judo, and in judo, you can redirect the force and not accept it, and it was the same thing. So whenever I get negative comments, I'm like, I don't accept that gift. Like, thanks for trying to give me this gift, but I don't accept the gift. That's your negativity, and if I don't accept the gift, who has the negativity? They do, right? And so I ordered some reflective gloves from a company in Europe, and they sent me 2 right-hand gloves, right? And so I reached out. So I couldn't use it, and so I reached out to them and said, hey, here's a photo. I can't do anything with 2 right-hand gloves, but I tell you what, I'll buy another set. Just send me 2 left-hand gloves, and then I'll have 2 pairs. Well, it took like 4 weeks to even get a response, and then they were like, well, I want you to prove it, and I was just like, I kept on filling out tickets and going on social media, and then I left them a 0 1-star review, and then I got an email from their owner who said, dear Mr. Saeks, we don't appreciate you. We don't have the time to respond on multiple methods to your aggression, basically telling me that if I continue, then they're going to shut off all communication. And I wrote back and I said, look, you can shut off all the communication you want. I've got a big voice. I'm a keynote speaker. Not that I'm all that in a bag of chips, but I just said, you don't understand. You made the mistake. I filled out your chat. I filled out your contact form. I filled out a support system, and I emailed the people from the email. Like I did 4 different ways to reach out, giving you an opportunity to resolve the situation. I said, you should probably Google my name. I said, and look at the outcome here. I'm the customer. You're now converting this to me instead of addressing the problem. I said, if you would just address the problem. So then I said, why don't you just send me out 2 left-hand gloves? And they said, we can't send you 2 left-hand gloves because that would damage 2 more pairs. And I just thought, these people do not even understand anything. Like at this point, send me another pair then. I'll pay for the shipping, whatever. And so finally, I said, you should probably think about this. I'd love to have this be my next topic of my LinkedIn or Forbes article because they didn't even understand. And so it was interesting how it goes back to your comment, how if someone leaves a negative review, instead of getting defensive, ask yourself, how did you participate in that relationship? Now, for me, when I had a bad review on Glassdoor from the person who embezzled from me and I fired, okay, I fired him. So I can't really change that. But in every other situation, I really do look at, how was I responsible? And maybe that's not the first instinct. Like I'm human. Maybe at first I get defensive,
right.
But then I step back and I go, okay, how did I contribute to the situation and what's right? And then taking care of it. I know finally they sent me another pair with some stock, thank you. I hope this solves the problem. And I just thought they still didn't get it. They messed up. They didn't understand. They didn't respond. Their customer service people weren't trained. And then, of course, they asked the classic, well, is there anything else I can do? It's just like all those companies who, they give you really bad service online. And then they're like, well, is there anything else I can help you with? I'm like, you didn't even solve the problem I called about. So anyway, I get to rant. It's my show. Any closing thoughts you have for our listeners today?
That's great. Closing thoughts. This is one that got me into wanting to be a success story strategist. I have this idea about why are so many people that are such amazing leaders, amazing entrepreneurs invisible online. And it's often because they aren't willing to open their mouth. They have stage fright crippling them in a way that they don't feel like they're worthy to have their voice be heard. And I wrote this, the 3 reasons to overcome stage fright and why you must fix it. Little ebook. I'm going to happily give that to you for it as a free giveaway.
Yeah, tell our listeners, where can our listeners get to it? If they stayed this long, give it to them.
Yeah. They said, it's going to be on brigham.com, but I'm also going to just give it in the show notes so you guys can find it.
I'll put it up there. Send us the show notes. Yep.
Send you the direct there. And then one of the things that's in here is as you're going through and recognizing how do I uncover these limiting beliefs that are holding me back, the things that are actually kind of choking your progress. If you can understand that your story is a gift, your expertise is a gift, it can change the way that you show up online. It can change the way that anytime you have you don't have to wonder whether or not your experience is valuable. Your experience is unique because nobody else has experienced it in that way. Your voice and your story is unique. So anytime you think about, is this something that will add value? Will this solve a problem? Will this actually help somebody? If the answer is yes, it will help somebody, then feel free to share it. And when you want help being able to do that, that's one of the things that I'm focusing on. I'm looking for those that are struggling writers, but they're amazing experts that want to go from the page to the stage. And that is something that I'm passionate about. I'm really excited to be that success story strategist for more of you. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here and help more people be less invisible and step into their own skin and into their own voice. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platforms. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We are weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.